us a quick overview of how much time you spent in America versus Canada for this Canadian election.
Yeah. A tragic weakness in my claims to any authority or expertise. I moved back in August, so just before the election. But I do pay some attention to it. I guess what I would say personally is that for the past 3 years, I've been covering a story that has been all-consuming in the United States. And it's been hard to keep up or put in perspective what's happening in Canada. But I did have some observation. I mean, about the result, I think everyone kind of agrees that there weren't a lot of huge surprises in the result. I mean, I think when going into it, the idea that the Liberals could win another majority was not held by many people. But the chances of them maintaining government, I think, that looked like a pretty reasonable thing. And after having had a majority, I think in Canadian history it would be more unusual than not for them to have not come back with at least a minority. But and I agree, obviously, with the proposition that the government is probably more stable than people might instantly think on seeing a minority. In large part because the New Democratic Party is without resources to fight another election. And has a lot of interest in not having another election, and is actually, I think, in historic terms, in kind of the sweet spot of their influence in Canadian government. I think they have had most influence, not when they had 103 seats in a majority Conservative parliament, but when they had the balance of power in a Liberal minority government specifically. In 1972, they were able to influence the government in long-lasting and important ways, whether for good or for ill is for others to decide on their own, but there would be there would not have been a Petro-Canada, for instance, probably, without the NDP. In 2004, which was the next time that they had that arrangement, they were able to persuade Paul Martin to take actions that were clearly NDP-type actions in a budget. They like to claim that it was the first NDP budget that they had ever delivered in 2004. But really, I think they only do that well when they have the current circumstance that they have now, and what they have to wait to see is the opportunities that present themselves over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, and how well they can use them. But in my following the campaign, the thing that I guess I have something to offer to you about it is what I was watching for in terms of influences in Canada that I could trace back to things that we have been seeing in the United States for a number of years. And I think as a media person, the thing that struck me and worried me the most was a really clear intrusion of fake news into the campaign. And its embrace in at least some careful fashion, perhaps, maybe not careful enough by the Conservatives, because it suited their political interests. These are stories about Justin Trudeau that were published in the Buffalo Chronicle. That had the Buffalo Chronicle is a fake news site. It has no claim to any journalistic standards, but it did manage to persuade other news agencies, including CBC, to investigate, to see whether there was any truth to the claims that they were trying to push out there about Justin Trudeau. That's a worrisome thing, both that it exists at all and that it can get some currency, but also Andrew Scheer was very close to wanting to play in that game, to push that story forward, certainly to have others do it for him. And in the long run, that's not going to be a good thing for the media, for the country, for government. We have seen how that has happened in the United States. And it is a small step towards what has become in the United States the creation of two silos of reality, not of opinion, not of partisanship, but of absolute reality. And we know that this is happening in the United States, but also in Europe. And we know we don't want that to happen here. But I think it could happen. I think it could happen faster than people realize. And I think the evidence of the last campaign, and Kelly will maybe have something to say about this because she's closer to it than I, I don't want to see that happen. I'm sure you don't want to see that happen, but if it's going to happen, this is how it's going to happen.
Thank you, Keith. Kelly, to continue the theme that Sean raised, most of your journalism was practiced in this current century?
It was.
Okay.
It is, yeah.
Your top of mind thoughts, please.
I mean, with our view with CP24, it's all Toronto all the time. So we didn't keep a big eye on the block. And so, 33 seats was really surprising to me. The NDP, however, in Toronto did seem like there was a lot of excitement, especially in Brampton East. We really thought that the NDP might have a good shot at a lot of ridings in Toronto. And so I was just kind of surprised because I think maybe through my focus as well, I was talking to more millennials and younger people as well, because they were the largest voting bloc ever, was this young age group. So I was interested to talk to them to see, where they were leaning. And a lot of them, maybe not surprisingly, were leaning more left. And so I just thought that I was surprised that the NDP didn't do as well as I thought they were going to, especially with the excitement around Jagmeet Singh. And there was a big, excitement about his personality and his charisma. And out of all the leaders, I found like he sounded the most like a real person, because we ran a lot of news conferences from start to finish. And so you heard the same lines over and over again. But with Jagmeet, you didn't as much. And he actually answered questions. And I know the reason why Mr. Scheer, Mr. Trudeau played it safe. I understand that. But it almost seemed like Mr. Singh was kind of filling in Trudeau's shoes in the last election, where he got to be the accessible one, the guy that took the selfies, the guy that just seemed like a guy you wanted to go have a beer with. So that was surprising to me that the NDP didn't do, well, nobody got any seats except the Liberals in Toronto, but didn't do as well right across the board, I would say.
Well, supplemental for each person before we turn it over to audience questions. Google did some tracking and was pretty accurate on the Liberals and the NDP, but I don't know if you noticed that Google was way off on the NDP, which may have meant those millennials that you're talking about were interested, curious, wanted to Google Singh, but it didn't turn into a vote. Yet the voting went up. So it's hard to predict. What are your views on millennial voting?
A lot of people told me they were not going to vote strategically, and I just don't think that was true. I think a lot of people, it was unpopular to like Trudeau because of some scandals that precipitated this election, so they said they were more leaning NDP, but it's like the people that lie when people called them to take polls. I think that people did vote strategically and they went Liberal, I think. But I think they were interested in Jagmeet, obviously. They were Googling him.